Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages, I am your humble host, Chaz Broganzo, and this is another episode of What's Next. This is a story. I had, well, let's just say I had a multitude of stories that I was going to hit within the last day or so. But the parlor story, which blew up in the last 48 hours, that was something that I had to just do solo by itself. And fortunately, another story that has just fallen into our lap, but the media, surprisingly, the left wing media, has not touched this story. And this is an article that was printed in Time magazine, or I like to call it Time Ragazine, because it's a rag and it hasn't been anything of influence or anything of relevance uh, for at least a decade. Look at its Time Person of the Year annual. So, yeah. But this is a story which, to me, is extremely, extremely surprising and, shall I say, ballsy to admit to. You clearly admit to guilt. You clearly admit to guilt that this was the plan all along. Let's take a look. The secret history and shadow campaign that saved the 2020 election. Time magazine. As you can see by the post, the picture post, you see Trump, you see Biden. There he is right there. And goes, there he is right there off to your left. I'm sorry, off to your right. Because count every vote, Biden, blah, 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 blah. This was written by Molly Ball. Now, of course, I don't know Molly Ball from a hole in the wall. But But it's neither here nor there. I'm going to try to make this a short, maybe 5 to 7 minutes, maybe eight. But this story is very deep. They talk about election night, what happened, they expected rioting and looting and gnashing of teeth, and nothing because, of course, their guy won. Unlike had Trump won early, that supposedly the left was expecting something different. But there were issues, and this has been talked about since the election. There have been issues regarding irregularities and discrepancies in regarding to a number of states. I've talked about it in I think one or two videos prior. But this is something that say, hey, this was the plan. We meant to do it, and we don't give a damn. Yeah. Like I said, it's very surprising and very eye-opening. So when you have the so-called supposed conspiracy that the former president was putting out in regards to, hey, you know what, there is shenanigans going on in these states, and we need to take a look at it. You know what? Everybody, though, you had everybody on the left go, sit down, shut your mouth. Biden won. Let's move on. But when you have those involved, when you have those involved, this is very telling. Quote, their work, which was the media, the big tech, working hand in hand, collusion, conjunction. Quote, their work touched every aspect of the election. They got states to change voting systems and laws that helped secure hundreds of millions in public and private funding. They fended off voter suppression lawsuits, recruited armies of poll workers, and got millions of people to vote by mail for the first time, which the system was not meant to handle. The system was this system that was created was not meant to handle the overload of millions of mail-in balloting. But then a pandemic will give you that opening. They successfully pressured social media companies to take a harder line, or should I say a hard line against, quote, disinformation, which is one of the most bullshit words ever thrown out there, and used data-driven strategies to fight viral smears. They executed national public awareness campaigns that helped Americans understand that the vote count would unfold over days or weeks, preventing Trump's, quote, conspiracy theories, end quote, and false claims of victory from getting more traction. This was intentional. They're clearly saying it right now. They're just saying, you know what? Yeah, we did it. We don't care. After Election Day, they monitored every pressure point to ensure that Trump could not overturn the result, i.e., getting the traction out there on social media. Because as we saw with the Hunter Biden story, which got no traction other than Tucker Carlson, who millions watch every single night, you had Bobulinski, who was witness to Hunter Biden and Joe Biden's shenanigans in regards to their business dealings that Tucker did a 45-minute interview on, which I suggest you check out. If you haven't seen it already, of course, this was back in October, and then he revisited it later on. The quote, the untold story of the election is thousands of people of both parties who accomplished the triumph of American democracy at its very foundation. End quote, says Norm Eisen, a prominent lawyer and former Obama administration official who recruited Republicans and Democrats to the board of the Voter Protection Program. Wow. Just wow. Intentional, on purpose, in your face. Here's what we did. And again, we don't give a damn. You can't do anything about it now that we sit here February 6th, 2021. But there's more. And right now, wow, I thought I could do this in 8 minutes, 7 to 8 minutes. Nah, it's not going to happen. I'm going to try to wrap this up. This is very interesting. We go to this section right here. Quote, for Trump and his allies were running their own campaign to spoil the election, the president spent months insisting that mail-in ballots were a Democratic plot and the election would be, quote unquote, rigged. Yeah. Yeah. Quote, his henchmen at the state level sought to block their use while the lawyers brought dozens of spurious suits to make it more difficult for vote and intensification of GOP's legacy of suppressive tactics, which of course is BS. Before the election, Trump plotted to block a legitimate vote count, and he spent months following November 3rd trying to steal the election. He lost. Yeah, the infamous word, steal. Interesting. With lawsuits and conspiracy theories pressured on states and local officials, and finally summoning his army of supporters to the January 6th rally that ended in deadly violence at the Capitol. But that was okay. But January 6th, which has been compared to 9/11, which is an absolute insult to the 3,000 whose lives were lost, to the hundreds, to the thousands of first responders who were injured and or died. That's an insult, but that's okay. If you're a Democrat, you're a liberal, that's okay to say. But if you are a Republican or a conservative who says, you know what, this is absolute garbage, how dare you compare this little incident to the tragedy that was 9/11? Oh my gosh. How dare you support Trump? Or, you're racist. I don't know where that would come from, but then again, this is what the left do. And this is one part of the article I really wanted to emphasize. Check this out. Quote, that is why the participants want the secret history of the 2020 election told, even though it sounds like a paranoid fever dream. A well-funded cabal of powerful people ranging across the industries and ideologies working together behind the scenes to influence perceptions, change rules, laws, steer media coverage, and control the flow of information. They were not, quote, rigging the election, they were fortifying it. And they believe the public needs to understand the system's fragility in order to ensure that democracy in America endures. Think about that. Let that stew. Let that marinate for a second. If that one chunk of the article doesn't crystallize everything regarding the 2020 election, I don't know what does. And yet we were saying it. You had Republicans, conservatives, libertarians, even moderate Democrats who were saying, you may want to take a look at this because there's a lot of things that will make you scratch your head. And once again, allow me to emphasize discrepancies and irregularities in certain states. But that's not my opinion. That is there. The proof is in the pudding regarding the article. It's all about intention. It's all about intention. And this is what this Time magazine article basically makes clear. Say, hey, we did it. Here's how we did it. Here's why we did it. And to the 80 and 100 million people out there who basically supported this president, go yourselves. That's it. That's what it comes down to. And it's not about what, and not about, well, you know what, it's okay. We're going to wait for 22. We're going to wait for 24. No, it's not about that, because it's about changing the culture. And if you can't change the culture, then the same shenanigans and nonsense. If you don't change the voting processes, the same crap is going to happen in 22 when, for example, when Kemp tries to run for re-election in Georgia, and then you have Stacey Abrams, clown girl, buffoon, who's basically just a step above Cortez in intelligence, and that's not saying much because that's basically room temperature, could possibly win in 22 and take Kemp's seat because Kemp basically pussified out when he did everything accordingly, reopening the schools, say, hey, you know what, we got the best information, whatever. But then when Trump stepped in and said, hey, you know what, you need to take a look at this. You need to have your Secretary of State take a look at this because we got some discrepancies going on here. Had he said it that way, I think the governor and the Secretary of State basically would have stepped in and said, listen, we're going to do an audit. We're going to make sure the signatures match. We're going to make sure that, when you had voter dumps at 4 o'clock in the morning, be investigated. No. Trump with the whole Opstay de Ilstay and, released a Kraken and Giuliani and all this nonsense. And it didn't have to go that way. It could have been investigated thoroughly and correctly. But Trump went on a tantrum after the election. And I can't blame him. We all felt that way. But it is what it is at this point. But this Time article, and I suggest that you take a look at it. I'll have the links down below. And like I said, it's a very interesting article, and it's very interesting, and it's a very in-your-face article to say, nah, 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 boo-boo, we did it, and more than likely, they will do it again come 22 and or 24, unless something is done, unless the voices are heard and heard loudly. But with that being said, I'm Jazz Broganzo. This is what's next. And we'll see you guys next time. Peace. And this is one part of the article I really wanted to emphasize. Check this out. Quote, that is why the participants want the secret history of the 2020 election told, even though it sounds like a paranoid fever dream. A well-funded cabal of powerful people ranging across the industries and ideologies working together behind the scenes to influence perceptions, change rules, laws, steer media coverage, and control the flow of information. They were not, quote, rigging the election, they were fortifying it. And they believe the public needs to understand the system's fragility in order to ensure that democracy in America endures. Think about that. Let that stew. Let that marinate for a second. If that one chunk of the article doesn't crystallize everything regarding the 2020 election, I don't know what does. And yet we were saying it. You had Republicans, conservatives, libertarians, even moderate Democrats who were saying, you may want to take a look at this because there's a lot of things that will make you scratch your head. And once again, allow me to emphasize discrepancies, irregularities in certain states. But that's not my opinion. That is there. The proof is in the pudding regarding the article.